Well, retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey is with me. Cheryl, always good to see you.
Thank you.
25 years ago, these LA riots. Take me back to that moment for you and your memories, being part of the police force here in Los Angeles.
Well, you know, we know that these things go on, and so, you know, this video validated those things that we know that occur, that everybody tries to pretend like this is an abomination and this is not what happens. And I'm not saying it happens day in and day out, but it happens with some frequency. And so now you can no longer deny that. But what hasn't changed and what continues to happen is that police departments, LAPD and others, continue to minimize and mitigate that bad behavior by officers, and there's no accountability, there's no consequence for that kind of behavior.
You know, just before we went live, I asked you, when the video came out of the beating of Rodney King, what was it like being on the inside of LAPD, you know, being part of the force and having this out there in the world?
Well, people that look like me were angry, and we wanted something to be done substantively to those 4 officers who were involved in that outrageous and over-the-top excessive use of force. We knew this to be a violation of LAPD policy and procedure, and so we were expecting that something substantive would come of it. And what happened ultimately is that the police chief minimized and tried to explain away that bad behavior. And there was one person who I like to talk about that, you know, many people don't know his story, and that's Sergeant Fred Nichols, because he was a black man, a black sergeant on Los Angeles Police Department spokesperson and expert on use of force, and he testified truthfully.
This is him.
That's Sergeant Nichols, and he testified truthfully that that force was excessive, and the LAPD did what LAPD does, is they protected that organism. They did a punctious pilot on him, turned their back on him, and because Fred Nichols bled blue, he was taken aback by that, and he ultimately committed suicide.
It's incredibly sad. This is one of the deadliest riots in American history. I want to put up a graphic on our screens, because according to Loyola Marymount University, nearly 6 out of 10 Angelenos think another riot is likely in the next 5 years, increasing for the first time after 2 decades of steady decline. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because people are frustrated, and because, again, there's no accountability, there's no change. You know, we see police departments being more than too willing to just throw buckets of monies at families who are victims of deadly force and excessive force, rather than deal with the root cause, rather than deal with, we've got some problem officers, and they're in the minority, but let's call it what it is. Let's get them off the force. Let's train our officers so that they're adequately equipped to deal with people who don't cooperate, because that's inherent to police work, people who run from you, because that too is inherent to police work. You don't get to kill somebody because they won't come here. That's not how we're taught.
Do you see any change on the part of the police to be willing to do the hard work, to root out the bad actors, to change the culture, to improve relations with the black community?
I see a lot of lip service, and I hear words, but when it comes to action, for me, it's something very differently. And I mean, we have examples of that nationwide. We have examples of it here locally with the family of Ezell Ford, a young mentally ill man who was shot and killed by LAPD. The police commission said the shooting was out of policy. Police Chief Charlie Beck can get his head around that shooting. He sees no problem with it. And so unless and until you're willing to admit that there's a problem, then there's really nothing to fix.
All right. I mean, let's put this all in context. In the last year, Ferguson, Baltimore, and Chicago have all been flashpoints for national debate about police brutality and racial injustice. Does it seem as if we're right back to where we were 25 years ago? Does it feel as if any progress has been made?
You know, I would say no, but, you know, you'd have to ask the families, the victims, right? You'd have to ask the family of Sam DuBose and Sandra Bland and Terrence Crutcher and Charles Kinsey, who thankfully wasn't killed but was shot by a police officer because he says, I don't know why. And so, you know, when you have those kinds of numbers, those kinds of recurrences, has anything changed? I think not.
Well, Cheryl Dorsey, we appreciate the very, very honest perspective on the situation from 25 years ago and where we stand today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.